much. Thank you.
See you at the Met Gala.
Well, you won't, but
maybe.
unfortunately, I'll be watching though.
Oh, okay.
Blake Lively didn't skip the 2025 Met Gala. She was banned, not postponed, not politely declined, banned, and not with a quiet whisper or a gentle pullback. This was a full-on exile from fashion's most elite and exclusive night. Just 3 years ago, she wasn't just another celebrity guest, she was co-chairing the entire event. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Vogue editor-in-chief Anna Wintour, center frame on the red carpet, hailed as one of fashion's modern queens. Every camera angle caught her. Every outlet praised her. She wasn't just attending, she was the moment. But this year, when the guest list dropped and the cameras flashed, Blake was nowhere.
Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds didn't attend the Met Gala, but were they rejected from it?
And the silence around her absence, that was louder than any red carpet entrance. What made it worse wasn't just that she didn't show up, it's that no one even asked why. For someone who used to dominate Met Gala coverage with handmade gowns, viral transformations, and designer partnerships planned months in advance, the lack of buzz was brutal.
Also not in attendance, Anna's pet Blake Lively, not there. Ryan Reynolds, her husband, not there. Could this have anything to do with a certain lawsuit that she's brought that has now made her rapidly persona non grata?
No speculation, no anticipation, just complete absence. Because this wasn't a choice. This was a lockout. A quiet but deliberate erasure from an event that once helped define her image. And behind that closed door was a mountain of unfinished business. The kind of skeletons that no amount of sequins could hide.
And there's actually video footage of her pointing like this.
The public may have moved on, but the industry hadn't. The Plantation wedding in 2012, that wasn't just a controversial venue. It was a brutal reminder of how far celebrities will go to wrap trauma in aesthetics. Blake and Ryan tied the knot at Boone Hall in South Carolina, a place where enslaved people were once chained, beaten, and worked to death. And she called it a romantic backdrop. For years, that detail was buried under glossy photos and lifestyle blogs. But when America started having real conversations about race and history, the image didn't age well. It rotted, and Blake never truly apologized. She just donated money and hoped the outrage would fade.
I think that none of the women are straight villains and none of the women are straight heroes, just like in real life, you know? Yeah. You know, we've got lots of colors and lots of sides to us.
Then came the blackface sketch. A long-forgotten Saturday Night Live clip resurfaced where Blake played a caricatured, ratchet black woman, complete with a fake accent, over-the-top twerking, and a cheap wig. The video was buried under copyright takedowns, but clips still survive on smaller platforms. It's not hearsay, it happened, and it painted a very different picture of the woman who once claimed to be a champion of equality. The worst part? It wasn't satire, it was mockery. The kind of content that gets careers canceled in 2025.
He was asked to leave the White House. Then he appeared on Fox News and said he thinks he can still salvage his relationship with President Trump, which is like Justin Baldoni saying, "I'd love to work with Blake again."
And still, no apology, just silence and scrubbing. Add to that the web of fabrications and PR spin that's followed her like a shadow. Stories about her kids' birthdays, fake quirky mom quotes on talk shows, and a suspiciously timed civil rights award from Time magazine right after public backlash. One after another, they piled up. Each lie layered like foundation over a collapsing image, and in the end, not even fashion's highest temple wanted her around. The Met Gala didn't make a statement, it didn't need to. The invite never came. For a woman whose career was built on showing up and being seen, the absence was devastating. And not just because she missed a party, because the message was clear.
Blake and Ryan were no-shows at the Met Gala. Now, this is an event they've been to a lot. They weren't there last year. She was editing the movie, It Ends With Us, stealing it from Justin's grasps. But now they didn't show up, and they have reasons.
You don't get to wear the culture you mocked. The glamour couldn't protect her. The red carpet didn't show up to save her. This time, the silence was the statement. March 21st, 2024. Blake Lively's PR team went into crisis mode. With the Met Gala just weeks away and whispers already starting to circulate about her absence, they did what they've done before. They pre-spun the story. Carefully coordinated blurbs were sent to top outlets, TMZ, People, Us Weekly, all pushing the same sugar-coated headline. Blake and Ryan skipping the Met Gala due to scheduling conflicts. No fuss, no drama, just a polished little footnote to explain away a gaping silence.
And a lot of these people, a lot of these A-listers dropped out last minute, okay? Last minute.
It was classic Hollywood damage control. Drop the excuse early, let it sink in, and hope no one asks questions when the big night comes and goes without a single lively Reynolds sighting. And for a moment, it worked. The mainstream press didn't push back. The headlines ran as if they were fact, just like they had in 2023. People magazine called it a mutual decision. TMZ blamed work obligations. It was also perfectly vague, exactly how her team wanted it. But here's what they didn't print. There was no invitation to turn down. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds weren't skipping, they were skipped, left off the guest list completely. And the person behind the blackout? Anna Wintour herself, the icy, iron-fisted editor-in-chief of Vogue, and the one woman in fashion whose opinion can make or break a celebrity's access to the Met Gala.
They're done, and it's no wonder everyone avoided them like the plague.
Blake didn't get a polite, maybe next year. She was already cut, her name never even considered when the final list was locked in. This wasn't a misunderstanding, this was a deliberate erasure. And it wasn't just about this year. For the second year in a row, Blake and Ryan were absent from the Met Gala, an event they once dominated. Their last appearance was in 2022, when they were honored as co-chairs, hand-selected by Wintour and front and center on the iconic museum steps. That same woman who once crowned Blake as red carpet royalty had now quietly revoked her crown.
TMZ just dropped a bomb on Blake Lively, and it made her day from pretty bad to devastating.
The fall wasn't just symbolic, it was calculated. Anna doesn't forget, and she doesn't forgive when a public figure becomes a liability to the image of her event. Behind the scenes, Blake's team tried to save face. They put out just enough fluff to distract casual readers, hoping no one would notice the glaring omission. But in fashion, absence speaks volumes, especially when it happens twice. Especially when your last public appearance at the event was as its literal host.
Finally, I've been teasing that all week, and let me just say to all of the women out there that are watching, no matter what you do in life, you never, ever, ever go full Amber Heard.
Blake didn't fade away. She was removed. And no amount of well-timed Instagram posts or talk show smiles could change the fact that her name had been quietly, permanently crossed off. This year's Met Gala wasn't just another night of couture gowns and celebrity selfies. It was a pointed, powerful celebration with a message. The 2025 theme, The Art of Black Dandism, was a tribute to the deep-rooted legacy of Black style, fashion influence, and cultural resilience. It honored the sharp tailoring of Harlem Renaissance icons, the regal grace of African diaspora aesthetics, and the trailblazing designers who turned resistance into runway. Every stitch, every silhouette, every curated piece told a story, not just of fashion, but of survival, pride, and identity. It wasn't about excess. It was about history, culture, authenticity. And for once, the Met Gala made it clear. This was not a space for performative allies, tone-deaf glamour, or recycled apologies. Which is exactly why Blake Lively didn't belong. Not this year. Not with this theme. This wasn't the moment for someone with a well-documented history of romanticizing America's darkest past to stroll down the carpet and pretend it never happened. Because no one had forgotten that she chose to get married at Boone Hall Plantation, a site where enslaved Black people once lived and died in chains. A place steeped in blood, brutality, and suffering. And Blake didn't just hold a private ceremony there, she called it a romantic backdrop. She posed for wedding photos among slave quarters, turned a historical crime scene into a Pinterest aesthetic. And while backlash eventually forced her and Ryan Reynolds to express regret years later, there was never a real reckoning, just a donation and a press cycle. That kind of history doesn't go away. And with a theme this year so deeply tied to Black pride and Black pain, inviting Blake would have felt like a betrayal of everything the event stood for. Imagine her walking the carpet in designer couture, smiling under flashbulbs, while the entire night was meant to honor the very culture she once trivialized for Instagram likes. The optics would have been a disaster. It wasn't just about fashion anymore, it was about accountability. And fashion, for all its flaws, understood the moment. They drew a line. The people behind the Met Gala, designers, curators, organizers, knew what it would say to allow Blake Lively back into that space. After everything, after the Plantation wedding, after the blackface sketch, after the faux activism wrapped in pastel Instagram posts, this year was about truth, not PR spin. The decision not to invite her wasn't a petty exclusion. It was a calculated move to protect the integrity of a theme that deserved reverence, not spectacle. Because 2025's Met Gala wasn't just another night of opulence, it was a cultural statement. And in a space finally centering the voices that fashion once ignored, there was simply no room for Blake Lively. That wedding wasn't just a bad look, it was a full-scale cultural implosion. The kind of misstep that should have permanently altered a public image, if not ended it. In 2012, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds chose to get married at Boone Hall Plantation in South Carolina, a location infamous not just for its antebellum charm, but for its horrific history. Boone Hall wasn't some quaint southern estate. It was a slave plantation, a site where generations of black men, women, and children were beaten, sold, raped, and worked to death under brutal conditions. This wasn't hidden history. Boone Hall offered full tours of its slave quarters. Its legacy was clear. Yet Blake and Ryan saw it as nothing more than a rustic backdrop, a vintage aesthetic, the perfect place to stage their Pinterest-perfect wedding day. They dressed it up in soft pinks and florals. Photos were filtered to feel whimsical and warm. Every detail, from the antique silver to the oak-draped ceremony, was choreographed to evoke timeless elegance. But beneath the lace tablecloths and curated lighting was a land built on pain and dehumanization. It wasn't just tone-deaf, it was violently oblivious. And when the wedding resurfaced in public discourse during the cultural reckoning of 2020, people didn't just criticize Blake and Ryan, they were furious. Instead of owning the damage with a real personal statement, Blake took the predictable PR detour, a donation. She and Ryan issued a carefully worded apology that never mentioned Boone Hall by name, followed by a $200,000 donation to the NTRZLACP.
There's an article recently saying that Leighton and I were frenemies, and it's
frenemies. Is that the new term, frenemies?
Yeah, we're friends, but we're also enemies. And it's really strange because they always want to pit women against each other. You don't hear about like Penn and Chase hating each other.
And just like that, they tried to tie a bow on it. The statement was vague, almost robotic. It didn't include words like slavery or violence. No details. No acknowledgement of the specific history they chose to romanticize. It was more about restoring their image than making amends. Blake didn't face interviews about it. She didn't step into the uncomfortable conversation. She cut a check and moved on. And what came next? A reward. In a baffling twist of PR irony, Time magazine included Blake Lively in their 100 most influential people list under the civil rights category. Yes, civil rights, citing her donation and so-called activism. A woman who held her wedding on the very soil where black families were destroyed, now being celebrated for her contribution to racial equity. It wasn't just absurd, it was insulting. It sent the message that with the right stylist, the right publicist, and the right amount of money, even the ugliest history could be rebranded as growth. The Plantation wedding didn't haunt Blake because she buried it with money and press fluff, but it haunted everyone else. The people who saw her as an icon, a trendsetter, a voice. That's why it came roaring back in 2025. That's why the Met Gala, themed around Black cultural excellence and historical legacy, couldn't afford to pretend this didn't happen, because it did. And it was never truly addressed, just filtered and forgotten. But it didn't stop there. As if the Plantation wedding hadn't already fractured Blake Lively's image beyond repair, another moment from her past came roaring back. And this one was even harder to explain away. A resurfaced Saturday Night Live sketch, originally aired during her 2009 hosting appearance, showed Blake in full-on caricature mode. In the clip, she adopts a fake, exaggerated ghetto accent, wears a cheap wig, and acts out a stereotypical version of a loud, ratchet black woman, complete with forced slang, wild gestures, and over-the-top twerking. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't satire. It was a white actress mimicking and mocking black culture for laughs on national television in front of a cheering live audience.
So they'd put me in the front row a lot because there were amazing singers and dancers that were just kind of saying the words, but I would be like, like big, over the top.
And while SNL's archives are massive, this particular sketch has become a ghost. It's been scrubbed from official platforms, flagged repeatedly under copyright claims, and mysteriously missing from even third-party re-uploads. You can't find it on Peacock. It's absent from NBC's YouTube channel. Yet, despite the cleanup effort, it's still circulating quietly. Screen-recorded, uploaded in fragments on obscure platforms, whispered about in Reddit threads, and shared through private links. Because in the internet age, nothing truly disappears. And once the Met Gala's 2025 theme was announced, a theme that boldly celebrated Black excellence, legacy, and fashion history, people started connecting dots. This wasn't just a one-time slip-up. It was part of a pattern: the Plantation wedding, the performative donations, the made-up narratives about social justice growth. And now, the resurfacing of a sketch rooted in racial mockery. It painted a clear picture of a celebrity who had long dabbled in appropriation and ignorance, then moved on without accountability, protected by styling, PR, and silence. But in 2025, that armor finally cracked. Fashion's elite, already hyper-conscious of image, reputation, and cultural alignment, weren't going to let the Met Gala become another platform for damage control. With the spotlight so clearly focused on honoring Black contributions to style, art, and culture, having Blake walk that carpet, smiling, posing, spinning in couture, would have been a slap in the face to everything the night stood for. So the decision was made quietly, firmly, and without public explanation. Blake Lively is not welcome. Her name wasn't debated. It wasn't discussed. It simply wasn't there. Not in the room, not on the list, not even considered. Because no matter how many vintage gowns she's worn or viral carpet moments she's had, no amount of sequins can cover up what she brought into the culture and what she chose not to take responsibility for.